In this video, we are going to write a simple greeting application that uses three visual controls: a label, a text box, and two buttons. We will use the text box to accept an input, and then we will use the greeting button to process the input and display the greeting text using a label. So if I will write a name here, let's say week, and then clicking the greet button, it will display a pleasant day to you week. And then clicking the exit button will terminate the application. Okay, so let's begin writing this simple application. Inside of our Visual Studio, I have already created a new form, and then what we are going to do next is to resize our form and change the necessary properties of our form. So let's start by changing the name of our form. So let's move to the name property, change this to FRMain, form border style, change this to fixed single, maximize and minimize button, change this to false, and then start position, change this to center screen, and then the last one, the text property, change this to label, buttons, and text box. Okay, so we are now ready to place our visual controls inside of our forms. Let's start with a label. From your toolbox, look for the label. So it is usually located under the command controls, and then click it and click it somewhere in your form. And then let's find the button. So click the button and then place it somewhere in your form. Then click it again to place another one. Okay, and then the last one is the text box. So let's find the text box. Here you go. And then click it right just next to your label. And then we have to change some properties of our controls. Let's start with the label. So select your label, and then we have to find the text property. And then from the text property, let's change this to enter your name, colon. Then press enter, so it will change the text displayed on our label. Okay, then place the text box just right next to our label, and then stretch it out. And then just below the text box, let's place another label. Click the label, and then click it just below the text box. And then let's change also the text property of this. So at the bottom, so this will hold the result of our greeting. So we have to remove the default text value for this. And then we have to assign a meaningful name to this label. So label, prefix it with LBL to indicate that this is a label, and then followed by the real name, greet. And then press enter. And then change the font face as well as the size. So let's select the font, click the ellipse button, then you choose the font face that you want to use. So for my case, I'm just going to stick with the original one, but I'm going to choose a different size. Let's say 20, and then click OK. So there you go. And then this is my label, and then place it just below the other label. Okay, and then let's resize our form. Okay, so there you go. And then one last thing, we have to change the text of our button. So at this point, the text of our button is displayed inside of our button one. So we have to change this. Let's change this to, so this is the text property. Let's change this to greet. And then the other button, let's change this to exit. So let's try running this. So what we want to happen is that whatever text we type inside of our text box, let's say week, clicking the greet button will display a greeting using the label just below the first label. And then clicking the exit will close the application. Okay, so let's start writing the codes. So we want that to happen whenever we click the grid button. So let's select the grid button, and then inside of our events list within the property window, so let's look for the click event. So here you go, and then double click this, and then let's write here. The name of our label is LBL grid, and we will make use of the text property because we want to display a text using the label grid. So we will write there, and then the name of our text box. Okay, so let's find out what is the name of our text box. So let's go back to our designer and let's see what is the name of our text box. And then the name of our text box is text box 1. So let's change this to something meaningful. Let's say txt grid. And then let's go back to our grid button. We can just double click this. Okay, so it will automatically take us to the click event of our button. Okay, so here, let's write here inside the curly braces the txt grid the text. Okay, so that's it. And then let's try running this application. Okay, so let's write here week, and then clicking the grid button, it displays a pleasant day to you week. Let's change this to something like John. Then clicking this again, we'll change it to John. Okay, let's add another feature in this application that whenever we click exit, it will terminate the application. Okay, so let's go back to our form designer, select the exit button, or double click the exit button to go to the click event of the button. Okay, so let's write here application dot exit. So this will terminate our application. So let's try running this. Let's say Joe, then click the grid button, a pleasant day to you, Joe, and then clicking the exit button will terminate the application. All right, so let's summarize everything. So we use three visual controls: labels, two labels, and then we have an invisible label here, and then one text box, and then two buttons. So we use the text box to accept a name, and then we use the grid button to process and display the greeting using an invisible label. And then we use the other button, the exit button, to terminate the application. And then we change some properties of this. We change the property of our first label, the text property. We change it into enter your name. And then the second one, we turn it to be invisible by removing the text value of our text property. And then we also change the text property of our buttons, the grid, exit, as well as the name of our text box. So we change it to text grid, and also the name of our invisible label. We change it into LBL grid. And then we added some codes inside of our click event of the grid button. So we wrote here LBL grid, the text will contain a pleasant day to you together whatever the value of the text property of our text grid. And then we also do the same thing for the exit button. We added some codes inside of it under the click event so that whenever we click this, it will terminate the application by writing application.exit. All right, so that ends this video, and see you in the next lectures.